US President Donald Trump urged Iranians to keep protesting and said help is on the way. Meanwhile, the death toll in Iran surpassed 2,000. The US will host the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland as concerns grow over Donald Trump's desire to seize the Arctic island. Russia launched another large-scale attack on Ukraine overnight on Tuesday, targeting its energy grid and killing at least 4 people. US President Donald Trump urged Iranians to keep protesting. In a social media post, he wrote that help is on the way. Trump's statement comes just days after he said that Tehran wanted to negotiate with Washington. Now, Trump said he cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until the, quote, senseless killing of protesters stops. The U.S. president has repeatedly warned that Washington could take military action if it determined that Tehran was using lethal force against anti-government protesters. Qatar's foreign ministry, on the other hand, said it would rather resolve the issue through dialogue.
We have been talking to everybody in the region constantly on how to de-escalate. We know that any escalation of the sort that you described would have catastrophic results in the region and beyond, and therefore we want to avoid that as much as possible.
Iran has warned that the U.S. military and Israel would be, quote, legitimate targets if Washington uses force to protect Iranian protesters. According to a human rights group, more than 2,000 people have been killed in the crackdown on the nationwide demonstrations. The European Union's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas met with Defense Minister Boris Pistorius in Berlin on Tuesday. Kallas was welcomed with military honors and a wreath-laying ceremony before she and Pistorius discussed continued financial and military support for Ukraine and what Pistorius described as the Arctic question. Pistorius stressed that Germany would continue to support Ukraine and, quote, will not abandon Kyiv, pointing to the 11.5 billion euros Berlin is providing to Ukraine this year. He also condemned Russia's drone and missile attacks on Ukrainian civilians and infrastructure, which has left hundreds of thousands of households in the city and region of Kyiv without electricity.
Sein Vorgehen zeigt seine abgrundtiefe Menschenverachtung. Darüber dürfen wir nicht hinwegsehen, trotz aller Verhandlungen, die ohne ihn bislang laufen, zu denen er sich bislang sehr eindeutig geäußert hat, bis hin zu der Tatsache, bis hin zu der Aussage, dass alle westlichen Truppen in der Ukraine ein legitimes Ziel würden. Aber wie auch immer, für uns gilt, Berlin lässt Kiew nicht im Stich.
And in addition to Ukraine, the two also spoke about the Trump administration's threats to annex Greenland.
Now, on the state of transatlantic relations, which has been much of a subject recently. The United States is an indispensable ally, but it's also clear that our relations are not as good as they used to be. In every alliance, there are moments of open disagreement, but Europe will not junk 80 years of transatlantic relations. From Gaza to the fight against ISIS, to China's coercive economic practices, Europe and the US are stronger when we act together.
According to a survey commissioned by German magazine Stern, a majority of Germans would support military action in an emergency if Denmark were to invoke the alliance's mutual defense clause. Kallas and Pistorius declined to comment on the possible deployment of ground troops or on any potential triggering of the alliance clause. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will host a meeting with the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland at the White House on Wednesday. The expected meeting comes as concerns grow over U.S. President Donald Trump's desire to seize control of the Arctic island. During a press conference ahead of the meeting, Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen and Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen emphasized Greenland is not for sale.
Vores mål og ønske er fortsat fredelig dialog baseret på samarbejde, med respekt for vores konstitutionelle placering, folkeretten og vores ret til vores eget land og vores ret til vores selvbestemmelse. Men en ting skal alle forstå. Grønland vil ikke ejes af USA. Grønland vil ikke styres af USA. Grønland vil ikke være en del af USA.
Trump has repeatedly pushed the issue and has not ruled out using military force to take the island. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen subsequently warned that a US takeover of Greenland would mark the end of NATO. When asked to comment on the situation at the Global Europe Forum at the European Parliament on Tuesday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said it was not his role to get involved in discussions between allies. Instead, he redirected the question to emphasize the necessity to protect the Arctic, which he said involved the entire alliance. Russia launched another large-scale attack on Ukraine, killing 4 people and striking a power plant. The barrage consisted of more than 24 missiles and hundreds of drones in what was the second major attack on Ukraine in just 4 days. In recent months, Russia has ramped up its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, cutting power and heating in the height of the winter. In the Kyiv region, several 100,000 households were left without power. And in Kharkiv, at least 4 people died and 6 were injured. Another 5 people were wounded in a Russian strike in Ukraine's port city of Odessa. Meanwhile, Russian air defenses shot down 11 Ukrainian drones overnight. That's according to Russia's Ministry of Defense. Recently, Ukraine stepped up long-range drone strikes on Russian military and energy sites. Kyiv said Tuesday that it struck a drone manufacturing plant in Russia's Rostov region.
The United States has accused Russia of a dangerous and inexplicable escalation of its war in Ukraine. Speaking at an emergency meeting of the Security Council on Monday, U.S. Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations singled out Russia's launch of the powerful new hypersonic Oreshnik missile, which Moscow used for only the second time in what was a clear warning.
Just days ago, U.S. diplomats met with EU and Ukrainian counterparts to advance negotiations toward a lasting peace. Thanks to the leadership of President Trump, we are closer to a deal now than at any point since the war began. Despite this, Russia launched more attacks on Ukraine, including its launch of its nuclear-capable Oreshnik ballistic missile, targeting an area of Ukraine close to the border with Poland and NATO.
UN Security Council meeting had been called by Ukraine following last Thursday overnight Russian bombardment. The attack coincided with a chill in relations between Moscow and Washington. Russia condemned the US seizure of an oil tanker in the North Atlantic last week. Furthermore, US President Donald Trump signaled he's on board with a hard-hitting sanctions package meant to economically cripple Russia. Around 350 tractors drove into Paris with farmers protesting against low incomes and the Mercosur trade deal between the EU and South American countries. Farmers were demanding concrete and immediate action and will take their protest to the European Parliament next week.
Quand vous voyez aujourd'hui ce que font les Russes, ce que font les Chinois, ce que font les Américains, cette Europe qui ne sait pas où elle va et qui ne protège pas la production sur son territoire est coupable. Il y aura le Mercosur, il y aura le prix, il y aura tout ce qui nous pourrit la vie au quotidien.
The demonstrations came days before the final signing of the trade agreement, scheduled for Saturday in Paraguay. Farmers say the free trade deal with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay will flood European markets with cheap imports such as beef, poultry and sugar. French President Emmanuel Macron opposes the agreement but failed to muster a blocking minority at the EU level. A spokesperson for the French government said on Tuesday that Paris would make new announcements soon to help farmers.
Une décision de justice.
The outcome of Marine Le Pen's appeal trial will determine if the far-right leader will be able to run in the 2027 presidential elections. The 57-year-old French MP is back in court to appeal a March ruling that found her guilty of misusing European Parliament funds to pay for parliamentary assistants working for her party called National Front at the time. She says she's innocent.
J'espère pouvoir être entendu par la Cour d'appel.
En attendant, vous maintenez votre programme habituel.
D'esprit d'espérance en quelque sorte.
In the first ruling, Le Pen was sentenced to 4 years in prison, including 2 years of house arrest with an electronic bracelet and a 5-year ban on running for office. She also lost her right to vote. 11 other defendants will also be tried. The appeal trial will last until the 12th of February, but the verdict is not expected until before the summer. Air traffic was suspended for several hours at Budapest's international airport on Tuesday due to freezing rain. 5 flights were cancelled and 8 had to be diverted to other airports, but not to Vienna or Bratislava because those airports were also closed. Traffic did not return to normal immediately after the airport reopened, with delays of several hours occurring on Tuesday afternoon.
10 óra 25-től 13 óráig voltunk zárva, ez alatt a 2,5 óra alatt ugyanúgy 3-as fokozatú, tehát a legmagasabb szintű havas készültség volt érvényben, folyamatosan az összes havasgépünket takarítottuk és jégtelenítettük a futópályákat, a gurulóutakat, az előtereket, hogy vissza tudjon állni az üzemelés.
The freezing rain also caused disruptions to land transport. In much of Hungary, temperatures have not risen above 0 degrees Celsius for a week now.
A rendőrség keddi közlése szerint a Velencei tavon jelenleg 12 cm vastag a jég, de rámenni még több ponton is életveszélyes, mert a jégpáncél nem egyenletes. Magyar Ádám, Euronews, Velence.